Hi. Hi, this is Willis from Tech in Asia, your host for today. So, in today's very first No BS live session, we're going to talk about, the hard things of the hard things in our guest's journey. So, would like to please welcome Arrif from Chope and Sang from Green.
Hello, hello.
Hey guys.
We can't hear you.
Arrif, I think, yeah, you're on mute.
Sorry, my mistake. Hi,
It's all
everyone.
good. It's all good. Hey, thanks a lot for taking time to chat with us. So, no BS. So, let's try to be as real as possible. And I think the first question is like COVID-19, huh? Fast forward. Now we're now we're in June. How are you guys feeling?
You're in a happy answer, you go with Arrif first. You're in the
Sure.
more depressing
Let's-
view of the world.
Let's
You
go with
Spoon
Ari first.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that that both Sung and I were in an industry that was probably one of the hardest hit, along with tourism and retail. And so I think there was there were multiple stages of this, right? I think when you say it, when it hit, but I think looking back now, you can see that it didn't just hit. It was a gradual easing, gradual hits. I think multiple hits, if you want to put it that way. And when it first happened, we were very hopeful, almost in denial, that it would be as long and as drawn out as this. And we were, there was a lot of talk about V-shaped recovery and all that. And I think in early Feb and March, we were still, waiting for it to just disappear, whatever. China had pretty much was the only country suffering from it in a wide scale way, or a big scale way. But then when it started to really get big in Singapore and elsewhere in the world, that's when we woke up and we said, okay, crap, this is really going to affect our business. But how bad could it possibly be? And even then, we were like, nah, they won't lock things down. They won't. And I only tell you this story to emphasize how bad it was when they actually locked it down. And then they locked it down for 3 months. It was like this action was unimaginable to us, right? As much as we tried to have scenario planning, we're like, oh, what if it's down 25%? That was kind of as bad as you could think. So this was far beyond any scenario we'd ever thought of. So when it finally happened, it was something that we had just simply never prepared for. And we had to quickly, come to sort of go through the stages of grief and come out at acceptance as quickly as we could, so that we could pivot our business to do deliveries and so on. And the joke Song make is about, obviously we've reached the end of the lockdown now and we're coming back, but I continue to have that mindset that it's not we're done, we're back. I think we have to continue to prepare for there will be successive hits, and even if it increases, that it won't happen one time. It might take gradually over the course of coming months, possibly even years. Yeah. So it's not a happy answer, but it's happier than we were, I think, a week ago. I think that's fair.
Yeah, for sure. Son?
Well, for us, I think we run a more paranoid company here. So in February, I remember I was on the way back from this was like Chinese New Year, and my really paranoid brother in Hong Kong was like, I shouldn't fly back to Malaysia for like Chinese New Year. And I remember sitting down in one of the coffee shops, and I was like, I need to do some research and write to the company about like what I think is happening. So I remember this was sometime in January, like late January actually, so quite early on. So very early on, we had like a series of reports that started looking at leading indicators of like how cancellations were slowly kind of like trickling in. People were like slowing down on pre-orders. Mind you, like it was like maybe like a 5-10% kind of impact. Then this was late January, starting of early Feb. I started calling up like some of the F&B, F&B gurus that like have been in the space for a long time. And actually, a good benchmark was actually SaaS. So I literally read the SaaS economic impact report, and I mean, nutshell was basically like affected industries would be like a 30 to 50% kind of range, and that was actually like, oh, 50% is so bad. Like, really, is it going to be 50%? I mean, you fast forward a few more like months. For us, B2B impact was like 95%. The whole B2B events, catering space has pretty much like evaporated the past couple of months, right? No one's like going to the office. No one's like getting together in like big groups. Now the big groups are like 5, right? Or like 10 if you're like a funeral wedding. At the same time, I mean, I think what we did do at the earlier stage was actually then focus a lot more resources on B2C. So that grew by like a good like a 10 to 12 times in the past couple of months. Still not enough to actually still a net drop in the overall sales, but I think much better than like just having like just B2B like a tank and like not have a proper way to bounce back. So I think for us like that was actually a bit of like really paranoid. Okay, but let's make sure that we can just play the cards right. B2B is going down. Oh shit, it's going more than 50%, 70%, 80%. Shit, it doesn't even exist anymore. And like at the same time, like a transition over to like B2C. So I think that's pretty much like how we reacted in the past couple of months. Yeah, happy to share more if there are any more questions around this.
Yeah, that
Sounds like
really
such a long
fast.
time ago, by the way.
I know, right? Like everything just super fast, right? So basically, like some of the businesses, or rather, like revenue just evaporated. Just very quickly, hard hitting questions is that any layoff, any pay cuts, and how did the employees actually feel, and how do you get back the morale?
Yeah, I
Right?
can go first. We actually didn't do any retrenchments, but unfortunately, we did have to do some pay cuts and some furloughs. And I think we did it in sort of April, which in my mind was already late, right? But I think looking back at it now, it was fairly early in the cycle. Even earlier this week, we on Tech in Asia, you guys were reporting news that some other companies were just doing some moves now, which is we're already in June. So I think we acted fairly quickly, not the quickest we'd ever seen, but fairly quickly, which of course is an important learning from this whole crisis, right? I think the most important thing was for us to act fast and make tough decisions. Now, there were decisions that were not easy to make. Far from easy. They were like some of the hardest things we had to make, and to make them quickly with uncertainty. It's not like we knew how long or how bad this situation was going to be. So there was always this possibility that we were opening ourselves to criticism. Oh, you were more severe than you needed to be, or you weren't as prudent as you needed to be, right? And so there was incredibly difficult decisions, even from what's the correct answer, all the way down to the emotional impact of it on the people that we were making these decisions, the effect on them. But I think the learning was we had to make those decisions fast and not look back, and then live with whatever the consequences were. So I think we're also blessed that we did make decisions that roughly projected that we would have lockdowns for a couple of months in a couple of markets, which is actually what happened. So we're very close to reality in the end. So not easy, but we did it. We did it fast. We probably made a bunch of mistakes, but the key learning there was you cannot spend months worrying about it and second guessing yourself. Just you got to make a decision.
Yeah. Actually, reflecting on that, I think what Arrif mentioned about like there's so much. I think like if we move too fast, we're overreacting. If we didn't like cut deep enough, like then there's a bad call. There's like I remember actually right now that Arrif mentioning this because we did early on. We did a 10% cut of the workforce first, and then we did another 20% cut of the workforce. And I remember like one of our VCs saying you have to like cut once and cut deep, and that was like basically all the VCs were saying the same thing, right? And I was like, but how do you know, right? In early Feb, we were like, okay, we need to react. Let's do a cut. We did 10% cut. We remove all the other non-essential costs like part-timers, contractors. We also freeze like a lot of like benefits, healthcare, dinner claims, and a bunch of these things. And then we realized 2-3 weeks later that we need to do a deeper cut. I mean, on hindsight, one cut is better than 2 cuts. But we took a more like okay, we need to react fast now before it was actually going to be. I mean, before it's too late, and then do it again. And that's how we basically did it. And like we cut like up to 30% of our workforce, 20% of like salaries being deferred if you have to continue working. It's cut if you are less productive, and for the leaders, it's 30% basically. So that's where we are. Yeah, a bit
So
more aggressive than the cuts.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure, it's not easy. I'm going to talk more about like founders in motion in a bit. So, how do you make sure that your employees' morale it's still like really high and continue to fight this pandemic?
I think really high is a difficult bar. Honestly, I think at
Which
this point,
I was
even in
sitting
the
on it, like
global
really high.
context, let's say the challenges are hitting people from all directions here, right? On the job front, on uncertainty, there's increased workload. Sometimes there's job security. Then there's also personal side. There's home-based learning for people with kids. Like my kids, I got 2 kids at home. Like trying to be a teacher and a CEO is crazy. So keeping morale has been one of the biggest challenges for us. We revived one of the things that we went back in the days when we used to go to the office. We had something called a happiness committee, which is the sort of a group of employees who would do things like have organized drinks and things like that, and so we sort of tried to evolve that to an online space in the same way everyone started doing Zoom drinks and dinners. We start trying to do that as well. So we'd have group workouts, as a team. And obviously, it's never as good as meeting someone face to face, but I think the effort itself helps, right? It helps alleviate and make things. There's sort of a lighter moments that you can get to know each other. Because I think that the hardest part is you can no longer just walk over to somebody, tap them on the shoulder, say, hey, this thing or that thing. I just joke with them like, hey, I like your shoes or whatever. You can't even do that anymore. So we try to create that opportunity, but it is super tough because you do it once a week. It's scheduled. Only like 12 people dial into the workout, and it's difficult. So morale is hard. I think the other part of it is more work centric. Sometimes as founders, you think about the big picture, and maybe to companies like ours, we don't think big picture is that big. We're not thinking global macro. We're thinking about, but we're still thinking at strategy level. And for a lot of the team, the worry is not so much at the strategy level. It's almost like next paycheck, what's going to happen? Can we do things like what happens to my commission? Am I still going to be held to my targets that we had set at the start of this year when we did foresee that our business is going to go to zero for 3 months? So I think giving the certainty and answering those questions goes a long way. So it's just really small things like assuring people that that payroll will be transferred, and then transferring it a little bit earlier than usual, so people can see that. And to us, it's like that's the smallest thing you could do. Press the button on one day earlier, but it small things like that. I think
I'm
help.
gonna steal that. That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah, our VP of Finance
Yeah.
was the one who said, I want to transfer it before the weekend because I want people to see that it's come in. Yeah,
That makes sense.
That idea. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think on the topic of morale, I don't think it's like really high. Honestly, I think it goes up and goes down. I think right now it's probably one of the top three, definitely one of the top three problems that that's top of mind for me right now. I mean, a bit more context, I guess. So B2B, it was basically a huge pivot from B2B to B2C. B2B, you're looking at the sales teams, you're looking at like a totally different a fulfillment model. So you had a lot of people, and I mean, a totally different kitchen or what we call hubs, and a lot of it was actually a huge change from like the usual day to day, and it was almost completely overnight or over a course of like a week. Like we would switch like 2 kitchens over the weekend. Like last week you'll be like a sales rep. This week you'll be like a fulfillment hub manager, right? You'll be managing one of the kitchens, one of the cloud kitchens that we have, and it's exacerbated by the lack of like what Arrif mentioned. Like, I mean, we have all hands or like what we call harder on Zoom, and like right now people are actually more on the operational side of things, so less people actually can show up. When they show up, and Zoom is harder to be present, right? I mean, you see a WhatsApp here, you see a Slack red dot over there, you're going to click on that thing, you're going to click on that thing, and you actually like probably like listen to like a 20-30%, assuming you're even present, right? So like you need to communicate a lot more, and at the same time we have a lot more plans happening, right? I mean, we had a Koi thing. We heard about Koi. One day, the next day, everything had to move. We launched a couple of like partnerships. We launched new meal plans, and all these plans had to like move at a speed that was, I think typically you could take 2 to 4 weeks to do. Now we're like over the weekend, we need to get this up. We think of an idea,
Yeah,
we need to act on it
exactly.
tomorrow, and people are like, are not in person, right? And you can't tap someone on the shoulder. Hey, let's do this. Get in the war room. It's very different, and I think it's definitely something that we're still figuring out how to solve.
But actually, the flip side of that was, I mean, we had a similar situation where when dining in was stopped, very quickly we had to launch our delivery business.
Yeah.
Literally within 3 days, like Sunday afternoon, I said let's try this out. Then Tuesday evening was our first trial, and I think it has it's a double-edged sword. Yes, of course, it's a lot of work, and in a way that demoralizes, because it's like, oh my god, I have to do so much stuff. But at the same time, it also fired them up, right? Because I think a lot of people that work in our teams are at heart, they're startup people. They're doing things. They're more flexible and agile, and they're excited about new ideas and building new businesses. So I think a lot of the guys who got involved on the delivery side actually ended up more fired up over the 3 months, because they felt that they were building something from scratch, and they said that they learned things that they weren't learning in their previous role, right? So the role may not have changed, but they were learning so much more and seeing how they build up. And I think remains to be seen, but I think when we transition back to steady state, those learnings will be a lot more valuable than if they just spent 3 months doing these. And the fire and the passion that it brought probably occupies a different space than it previously was filled.
We see two camps at least. I mean, we see that camp that you're describing, which is like positive. They're like, attacking opportunity, and like, they're doing a bunch of things. So, this is so fun. We get things done in like half the time. And then the other camp that is like kind of maybe like a bit more negative, drag along. You sign up for sales and now you're like fulfillment. And like, when is this going to happen? And the commission problem that you mentioned, same problem, right? The commission was like 30-50% of salaries. And now it's like, are we going to get a pay rise? Are we going to like, what's going to happen here? Then it becomes like a less ideal scenario for some of these folks. So we see two camps. So I think you're right.
Yeah,
makes sense. So I think in terms of like morale of the employees, definitely it took a hit, right? So how about you guys? Like specifically when you, for example, Arrif, you have to make the pay cut announcement, the furlough announcement, and how do you feel? Like honestly, do you cry?
Not cry, but I think, how do I put it? The moment that you do it, you're already still, the right way to do it is to have everything prepared. There should be no ad-libbing. You should just be delivering the messages, and of course all of it is heartfelt, but you also don't want to be caught out not knowing what to say at that moment, because there's no upside, right, to breaking down and when you're delivering something as difficult as that. The focus should be on the people who it affects the most, not on yourself, I think. They're the ones who've just received bad news, right? So you can imagine, like, if you're a doctor and you go give somebody bad news and you're the one who's crying, it's like, I want help from the doctor, not I don't want to see that you feel bad for me. So I think that's our role, to help people when we deliver bad news to them, to think about what their next steps are and so on. I think fortunately in my case, the team took it very well. They understood the situation. Like, we were as clear with them as possible all the way leading up, in the weeks leading up to this, about how things were playing out. In fact, as a company, we share quite a lot of data across all our teams. So people are aware of performance and how things are going day to day. And that works both ways. When when things go down, people know that things are not well. And then like this week, when things have just gone gangbusters, people are also able to celebrate and feel a sigh of relief. So we try and share as much data. But personally, yeah, I mean, it takes its toll, right? You just sit back and you can't even go and have a drink with your friends or your colleagues at that point, because you're homebound. But you sit back and you think, this is not why I started a startup for, right? This is where the joy of building things and product and customers, all that stuff. This is the part they don't tell you about when you wanted to start a company.
For sure.
Yeah, so it really is tough, and it really makes you question more on an existential level. Like, are you doing your existence as an entrepreneur was not what you thought it was. It's going to come with all this other stuff. And I think for earlier we were saying the kind of people who are sort of 1-2 years into their journey and maybe haven't, fortunately are not dealing with that problem right now of whether it ranges from tough conversations all the way to retrenchments or whatever. The truth is that is part of the job, right? It's not just finding product market fit and thinking up cool marketing campaigns.
Actually, building on that, right? I think the tricky part about this also is that, I don't think it's the problems that we are facing. I mean, we had multiple bouts of running out of cash, food poisoning many years ago, kind of stuff. I think it's after that you can't be in the same room. The social element, I think Arrif just touched on, right? You can't be in the same room troubleshooting. You need to do it over Zoom right now. Actually makes a huge difference. I think a bigger difference than most people think. It's just not the same, right? It's just not the same when you have a problem and you're in a physical space and you're solving it together on a whiteboard versus over Zoom. I think it's a key difference.
Yeah, and it's also tough for the people who you're having those conversations with because you deliver the news and then they shut off the Zoom and they're just sitting at home, right? It's just there's no way to hey, let's go for a coffee or whatever, doing a more humane way. Yeah. You hear all these
earlier on. So
I was reading, over the last week, there've been so many announcements, and over the past few months, so many of them, right? And then they always say, X number of employees laid off on Zoom and so on. I'm like, well, how did you expect them to do it, right? You want to meet in the office, all 100 people meet in the office, and then I tell you the bad news, and then after that, I also give you COVID. It's there's only way that you can do it now responsibly, and yet it's still the worst way to do it. Yes. Anyway.
Well, I think there's never a good way, right? To do a layoff is basically a layoff is bad news, right? So however you deliver it, there's always ways to poke holes and yeah.
I think some ways are more questionable than others though. If let's say you send the HR lead to go and do it versus someone from the management or founding team or the CEO, him or herself doing it. Because I think some teams didn't do that right? It was just I'm going to tell you this that my boss asked me to relay to you guys. I think that's when it's really questionable. Zoom is just you have to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, how about shareholders? What do your shareholders say?
For us,
same
definitely.
Similar.
Yeah.
Similar.
I think right at the start they are. Well, it's hard to say, right? They are all over the shop, really. Honestly, some of them were ultra conservative, and as someone was saying, cut deep, cut once, and quoting. I think the thing the shareholders do a lot is they quote a lot from each other, right?
Exactly.
Yes. The hard thing about hard things is we gotta do this now. Get on the bus, get the right people, and then you pick up those catchphrases and you repeat them to your team as well. So they all end up saying catchphrases a lot. Is it helpful? Yeah, I think so. But everyone has an educated guess, right? So I think shareholders are useful to giving. I put it this way: investors, right? The board members rather than shareholders. I think your board is always going to be helpful in getting advice and benchmarking across other companies. And I think the most value that we get from them is understanding how other companies in the portfolio are tackling issues, or in some cases, the investors and the VCs actually go as far as having specialists in their teams themselves who can give advice, right, on legal aspects of restructuring or whatever. So that was helpful. But frankly, I think investors were caught as off guard as we were, and to be honest, they didn't have better answers at that time for our business specifically. They can tell us overall, we're terrified about what's happening, but then the second part of the question would be like, so what are you going to do about it? They weren't going to be like, here's what I think you need to do. Yeah. So,
no, I think similar. The only thing to add probably was I think you definitely see some of the shareholders. Some of our shareholders have more experience than others, and you can see some really trying to check in a bit more. And I think actually those small gestures go a long way. But like Arrif mentioned, right? Who knows? This is different from SaaS. One thing that I did from the get-go was actually call all the people that have lived through SaaS and ran a company to get some insights there, and still it was so different, right? And yeah, I think it's the same thing for shareholders or
one
investors.
thing I will say though is that I think constant communication or even over communication with investors is important at this point. So they're not going to come to you and ask for updates on a bi-weekly basis or whatever. But I get the sense that those updates, when they are provided, are extremely reassuring and useful. One of the best feedback I got was, our finance team prepared a sort of scenario analysis with like different, ways that we're going to play this, cost, revenue assumptions, and we sent that out, and it was very detailed. And then one of the board members, when I was having a chat with him, said, I suddenly feel calm after reading your deck, because it becomes very clear to me that you guys have thought through the scenarios and you are speaking to me from a very calm place as well. So it makes me calm. So sometimes, I think leadership really is not just about shouting from the top. It's sometimes just being very calm and saying, we've thought this through. Here's as bad as it can get. And if it happens like this is what we'll do. And then, maybe the business folds. So what? We can't help it if the world goes to hell and the business folds. It's nobody's fault. It's just what it is. And then they understand that you're being very real about it, as opposed to saying, oh, don't worry, this thing will bounce back in 2 days. Yeah.
I had a friend who said that.
Yeah.
Wow, 2 days. Okay, so Sankyu raised money in May 2019, 10 million, profitable for 2018. I suspect probably profitable as well for last year. And then you in one of the reports you mentioned that you plan to grow to 100 million in annual revenue. So obviously this shit happened. Did you raise any more money? And what are your thoughts in terms of like getting to that target?
I mean, just to clarify, I mean, our profitability is rather seasonal still, right? So we would achieve it on a couple of months in the year. It's not a calendar year or even a fiscal year kind of like profitability. I mean, honestly, right now, we are still probably six months away from achieving it again. Again, like a lot of it is like in the Singapore context is that there are grants, but at the same time, that just keeps your fixed cost really high. But it's elevated in that period of time where like JSS covers like a good amount of like wages, and like it gives us like the extra resources to pivot. So it's still the same almost. I mean, it's a 30% reduction in cost base after the cuts, but revenue has like a drop even more than that, right? And I think for us, it's still more than a good 2 quarters away from profitability. I think in terms of like the priorities right now as a company, it's really not the fundraise. I think in terms of priority for external, for survival really is profitability. The government support that like is coming through like bank loans. They'll give us like just whatever they give us just for extra rainy days cash, and then existing investors if necessary, and then external investors. And investors are definitely a lot more cautious right now. I think everyone definitely feels that capital calls and like everything, no matter what they say, right? I mean, I remember I just read this one of these VC newsletters that I subscribed to, and he was like, things feel the same like a pre-February, right? Nothing much has changed in terms of investment world. It's just look, see, let me see your plan, let me see how you rebound. And early on, we actually made a call to not focus on fundraising because it would just take a few of us out of the business, and we had to really focus on like profitability at a much more or much reduced revenue, right, and higher cost base.
Sure.
As a starting point. So yeah.
Yeah. So Arrif, you raised 13 million October 2017. So I think you shared your revenue numbers. I think that was last year. I think that was 13-14 million, if I haven't mistaken. So how has that changed your targets? And are you fundraising, or are you kind of like putting that on a pause, going for profitability?
Yeah, good question. I think the question of whether to raise funding now is determined by external and internal factors. The external factors obviously are negative, right? Nobody is rushing to deploy capital. VCs, as Sung said, are slightly on the more conservative side. You could argue that will quickly change in the coming months when the market picks up. Nobody wants to be left behind. There's a FOMO, right? The VC next door did a great deal and is featured in Tech in Asia. Then you also want, right, as a VC. So I think that will change. But I think internally there's a mindset shift that's harder to quantify. It's around playing defense versus offense, right? I think we've been in a defensive posture, not us specifically, the whole industry, every startup out there has been and continues to be in a defensive posture because we're afraid of the downside of COVID. But surely in a crisis like this, there are opportunities, right? If you rewind to the financial crisis during SARS, a lot of great companies use the crises like these to do things like consolidate the market, to invest in growth. And in fact, at a time when their competitors were not able to invest in that, right? Because there's a lot of research on how when times are good, everybody is running just to stay in the same place, right? Everybody's investing in marketing, and you can think of it as, whether you want to think of it as like Google auction prices for SEM, everybody's bidding it up, right? And so you're spending more. But when times are bad, that's when the guys who do have slightly more resources and are able to invest more actually gain a lot more per dollar than they would in the good times. So there's an argument that that market leadership is more easily built during these times, and I think shifting the organization to that offense is very difficult, no doubt, right? We just a few minutes ago talked about the morale issues, but shifting to the mindset of like, what does the next 12 months, 18 months, what can we achieve? That's the first step in building the vision of the company that you want to be. Then you construct the sort of the product roadmap, the business plan, and then from there, yes, then you go out and fundraise, and then you say, okay, here's what we want to build. Here's the proof of concept. Here's some emerging results we see from that. We've trialed a few things we're excited about, and if we get the funding or investment in growing that, we believe we can truly create something special. So I think that's the opportunity this crisis gives us. That
you guys are still you guys still sound quite bullish then, right? It's like more growth, less profitability as a priority right now. Would you say?
Yeah, managed. Okay, I want to manage expectations. It's both, right? It's got to be both, right? I don't think we're ever going to be in a stage where we can just go back to growth without worrying about profitability anymore. It absolutely has to be hand in hand. But I think there's a balance between those two.
But heavy emphasis on growth. It sounds like it. I mean, it is.
No, roughly about even. Yeah, I'll give you an example. Okay, coming back to the delivery business that we just launched. Yeah. Okay, and there's a lot of talk around that time around delivery businesses charging 30-35%. What nonsense! How can you charge so much? And then and we were out in the market charging much less, somewhere between 15 to 20% commissions, and it was less. And then you might accuse us of, hey, you're trying to undercut, and this is a stupid move because how can you be? And even the guys who were charging 30-35%, were doing layoffs and so on. They were clearly unprofitable. If you look at all the delivery players worldwide, I think Tech in Asia just ran a huge piece about this, that Meituan is really the only one that's profitable right now. So can delivery players ever be profitable? So that was a question, right? But then if you look at our unit economics, actually it was totally profitable because we were focusing on high-end, large order value restaurants.
So your AOV restaurants are quite high,
yeah. AOV restaurants are quite high.
The AOV is a key kicker. Domino's,
for sure.
AOV, high AOV, that's setting up for success.
Look, I'm not gonna pretend we weren't tempted to do some of the more popular items. Would we have loved to do, pizza, burgers, fast food, bubble tea? Yeah, sure. But it's hard to make money when your AOV is lower. So we sacrificed a lot of, I don't know what you call it, growth or popularity or whatever in order to make sure that we did a profitable business. And our team was very aligned by that. We were very excited about the idea of profitable delivery business. In fact, we were joking on our Slack chat. We were like, maybe we'll be the world's first profitable delivery business. And that's it. Correction, Tech in Asia says we'll be the world's second, but we'll take that anyway. The point is you can still. It's still a balance between growth and profitability. Unit economics profitable. Yes, we're underpricing our competitors because it's still profitable, and we sacrifice some growth in order to be profitable. But it didn't mean that the business didn't also grow really well over the last 8 weeks. So within the bounds of profitability, grow. That's the simple soundbite. Yeah.
I think that's really very interesting. I think that helps us move on to the next part of the conversation on pivots, right? We obviously talk a lot about that. So how about yourself? Like, obviously the B2B part of the business basically evaporated, and hopefully, it will reopen starting from tomorrow. How do you quickly pivot? Like you move really, really fast, right? Like the Koi partnership was insanely fast, and then find myself like ordering it as well. And how do you kind of like get from B2B, which is obviously a large chunk of revenue, and quickly move on to like B2C? And what are your thoughts on Arrif when he mentioned about unit economics, that bubble tea basically can't be profitable?
All right, the first question first. I guess that's more of like a mindset to begin with that we always had. Even in B2B space, we would move like a lot faster than the other competitors, and like in the earlier days of the business when it was B2C. So we kind of always had like that move fast, focus on customers and like follow them, create or recreate experiences. It's like one of the few kind of things that were top of mind. And I think when we went over and I think the team was already very aligned from the get-go. So that really helped. And like what Arrif mentioned, I think it's also quite important and quite key to like staying aligned, is that we share a lot of data transparently. I mean, people know the revenue numbers, they know the breakdown by BUs, they can find out how many bubble teas, cups of bubble tea we sold. They know how much is in the bank. They know the runway. They know the EBITDA. They know all these numbers, right? That's shared weekly, and even openly, you can go look at it if you want to look for it, or you can just walk into the office and look at the dashboard. So that really helped everyone like have the right kind of like context and with the right mindset that enabled us to pivot a lot faster with its problems after that, right? So now we are like dealing with like we move too fast. A lot of things are breaking. We could have like thought through some of these things a lot better. But I think that's how we did it. To Arif's point, I mean, I wanted to ask Arrif just now, right? The profitability you're talking about is you're like talking about unit economics. You're talking about being positive on a unit economics level, right?
Yeah.
Like for me, at least I was talking about like EBITDA. So I've been talking about like on a more steady state, like how can we just stand on our own feet, have a engineering team that like a typical F&B does not have. So from Green's perspective, right? And having like at the same time like a really expensive R&D team, a really expensive like management team that's thinking about like new BUs, thinking of new countries, thinking of all those things, right? And I think we're already at like, I mean, running it for half a decade right now. We are at a stage where we have to be, Grain specifically, EBITDA profitable. Otherwise, it will make sense. I mean, this is a sweeping statement, and pre-COVID it would be a lot easier. Now, like it's a bit tougher, but that's still a top of mind kind of like a focus and priority for us. We have almost always been a positive when it came to like unit economics. I mean, the business model is straightforward, right? You sell F&B, you sell something. We have cheaper rent. You have everything's cheaper. Like we can even be, we can theoretically be a lot cheaper from a capex standpoint to open up a restaurant. Cheaper from a capex standpoint and opex standpoint to run and open up a new location, and like that has been something that's been quite useful for us, especially in a period like this. So building it into like a Koi partnership, same thing. I mean, it was just basically using an extra part of the kitchen, and it was basically like an AOV play as well, right? So we actually increase our AOV with like bubble tea. So it's on top of like the grain meals or like hot chick buns, one of our burger brands. You could actually order a drink. Like what Arrif mentioned, I can't imagine a pure bubble tea business being profitable if you're only just delivery. Yeah. Because I think the thing that people missed out over here is that like if you are having like the rent of like a high street, so if you have an Orchard Road bubble tea store and you're paying like $25 per square feet versus like $250, which is what we're paying at like Tai Seng, you right now don't have the food, and that's essentially like the growth cost, which is like the footfall that you get being in like high street. You don't have to do deliveries because customers are picking it up. If you're doing that, I mean, your shutters are closed and you're still paying the same amount of rent, and you need to acquire the customers, you need to deliver the customers, is just crazy. So you have to be a cloud kitchen or delivery first kitchen from the get-go to achieve that level of like unit economics and also like business sustainability. Yeah.
So very quickly, Arrif, you mentioned about like your takeaway, your new takeaway business. So how is that like stacking up in terms of like overall revenue, in terms of like ratio? Is it contributing much? And how do you see that part of the business evolving, even
Sure.
post-COVID?
It's mostly a delivery business, right? I think takeaway is an even smaller part than delivery. So the delivery business is about 8 weeks old, and I think we've done a fairly good job of spinning it up from nothingness, right? If you had asked me 9 weeks ago, I would have told you we'll never do a delivery business, but of course we would never have predicted that we'd also be surviving through a COVID crisis. So it's grown very well over the last 8 weeks, despite our worries. I think the biggest factor that's powered it has been that the market is not like 20 or 30% bigger than it was pre-COVID. It's multiples bigger, right? We're not 5 times, 10 times bigger. In the space of 8 weeks, we've onboarded restaurants that we had never imagined would do delivery. I'll give you like some examples like Zen, which is Michelin star restaurant, small place, and then they serve caviar on brioches, and you'd be like, why would people order this on delivery? And to be fair, not a lot of people do, but some people do, right? And so there is this demand, this niche that's unserved. And for us, we were surprised when we surveyed our restaurants that 42% of the restaurants actually had never done delivery before, which is surprising because I would say, a huge percentage of Tech in Asia's coverage is around the incumbents, the super apps. And one of the big things super apps do is food delivery. And so you would think, isn't it a saturated business in Indonesia, in Singapore, and Thailand? But actually, what we're surprised to find out over the past 8 weeks is that many of the restaurants it wasn't like Grab and others were not throwing tons of money at them and saying, sign up, we can do this, we can do that. Something else was missing in that equation. And I think it boils down to two things. One was brand alignment. And the second one was the technology part, right? So because we already were in the business of building the technology, so a lot of these restaurants already trusted us that we could build this technology that allowed them to take orders. And I think that part was to our advantage, where Chope is primarily a technology company. Many people don't realize that. We build a lot of table management systems, queue management systems for restaurants. So adding on the ability to take orders and transfer it to riders was part of our DNA. The second part is brand alignment. I think, sure, anyone can do delivery, but I guess it's very hard to quantify, right? It's very hard to quantify why there was a lot of value in us doing this. But to use maybe a terrible example, it would be like, I don't know, would you buy a television from McDonald's? Probably not. You'd be like, there's no relationship there. But would you buy a bicycle from NASA? Yeah, you might. You'd be like, oh, these guys know aerodynamics, right? And so, with NASA, I guess is the answer here. Like, we were able to provide a better service that catered to our specific niche of restaurants in the medium to high end. They wanted better economics. They wanted more security around the drivers and riders, all these things. And it went all the way from not just the Singapore operations, but to the Indonesia side as well. We were able to adapt our operations across Indonesia as well to enable delivery and take out orders going to our many restaurants that weren't able to operate there. So yeah, a lot of pivoting happening at different times in different markets in different ways. It was a really interesting coordination problem too.
I think the mid high end high AOV play is actually a smart move. I mean, just from my own experience, and that is the number one most important thing to get right from the get go. Domino's being the prime example.
It doesn't. You don't need to run an Excel model to figure out that it makes sense to deliver something that has enough margin to cover the delivery cost. Because delivering like we always use the example of bubble tea, right? And if somebody can crack that, please go ahead. But $3 bubble tea, how much money can you possibly pay a driver to do that? Whereas if it's an $80 meal, there's probably enough there to cover some rider incentives and so on. Yeah.
Is there like a model that you would really focus moving forward?
Are you asking us about delivery?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Focus? No. I think the way we think about it is as we reopen, our focus has to be on serving the restaurants dine in again. Sorry, to answer your question directly just now, that business is about 10 times larger for us, right? As well as we've done in building up a business that on the delivery side, the dine-in business is 10 times larger for us, easily 10 times, probably more than that. So that is the focus for us, and we see delivery as an extra service that we provide to the restaurants, and it's a really nice synergy, right? Because we're not spending; it's the same diners, it's the same restaurants, and in times like this, it forms a good diversification for our revenue. Now you can imagine a situation in which you and your family might want to go on a Saturday, but then Sunday, you're like, you know what? We already went out yesterday. Today, let's just have dinner at home, but let's treat ourselves. So Chope wants to be able to serve all those use cases in a single app and with a single user experience and so on. So I think it becomes a really nice opportunity for us to own the food category for diners.
Interesting. San, so back to you in terms of like B2B and then pivoting hard on B2C. So post COVID, how do you see the situation in terms of how you navigate the company?
So I mean, for us during this COVID period, it was also a very opportunistic move to like expand the B2C arm that we actually started with many years ago, right? It just became like the priority the past two years because the AOV there was gigantic. I mean, that was basically our AOV play that was like brought it from like I mean, our AOV is healthy, just to be clear, right? B2C AOV is like a good $30+, but B2B AOV is $400, $500+ per order. And the competition is a lot weaker there, right? So that was basically our avenue during this COVID period to actually relaunch the B2C play and acquire a lot of customers through like opportunistic partnerships like Koi. Recently we had Boost, and like just being like I mean, we were one of the original cloud kitchens. We had that flexibility to like introduce new brands that they had a cult following but didn't have the reach that we had, right? So production, fulfillment, and also the tech to actually support that. So post-COVID, I mean, how we're looking at the whole thing is that actually it's going to be a B2C and a B2B business, trying to balance both again. Similarly to like Arrif, I mean, this was just really a really good time to actually launch relaunch one of the BUs. If you're a customer at home and you're ordering for like 1 packs to like anywhere from 5-10 packs onwards for like a team in the office, you can choose a B2C route. If you like, and that's actually how we started. So one of our earlier customers was actually Uber. So in the earlier days, it was just pure B2C. If you're eating with your wife, you order like through the Grain app. If you're eating with your team, you order through the Grain app. If you're eating with like maybe a board meeting, you order through the Grain app. And slowly people who enjoyed the Grain food would want it for like 20-30 packs for like their birthdays, for their gatherings, and then for their workshops at work. And that's how actually we started the B2B side of things. So we want to be also top of mind when it comes to like high quality food that you can eat every day, that gives you like a wholesome, there's a wholesome feeling, it's unexpected, and you can actually enjoy it at home or at work. And that's how we see it, right? It's basically like mouth share for us. And the focus is actually creating food brands to actually capture as much mouth share as possible. It's kind of a different approach that like I think most are taking, because we are essentially a food brand, create the food ourselves. I think sometimes people don't know that, yeah.
So can I ask, earlier you said that you had to set up a whole new kitchen as you suddenly spun up the B2C part of your business again. So what's the difference there? Why would the B2C kitchen and the B2B kitchen, why would you need a whole different infrastructure or back end to serve that?
It was the same kitchen. I mean, we had like, to simplify a bit, we have like a bunch of kitchens across the island. The B2B kitchen was one of the biggest kitchens that we had, but B2C grew 10 times. So to cope with the B2C demand, we had to switch kitchens essentially. So the same kitchens, but like to cope with the volume, we had to actually switch the B2B kitchen to turn it into a B2C kitchen to cope with the demand that was coming in. So that was actually the switch.
Is there any difference I mean, when you call it the B2B kitchen or the B2C, like what's the difference there?
There is a bunch of like things. I mean, first is the capacity, right? So if you, I mean, and we try to serve as many people as possible from a singular hub. So the hubs that we have is in Tai Seng, in Jalan Besar, in Farrer Park hub, in Manaus hub, and like we try to split it west and east to get more coverage for the B2C side of things. So when B2C actually grew to be a lot bigger, and B2B actually shrunk to like a 10% of like what we knew previously, it would make sense. It made sense to actually for B2B to actually switch over to the smaller hub that was a bit more central to serve the whole island, and have like the B2C hubs concentrating on the west side and the east side. Yeah. And there's also a bit of difference with the production flow, right? I mean, big batch, small batches, a bunch of things actually change. Kitchen equipment changes. The kitchen flow also changes. A storage space that is required also changes. So a lot of these different things that like actually on the hindsight, we talk about like what we do as like a pretty asset heavy business. Like we have like a kitchen because we cook. We have like our own delivery fleets. We have our own vans, our own drivers, our own riders. We have our own like office tech team, and it's always like a very daunting exercise. And we always call it like a stupid move in the beginning to want to do the whole Apple, control the whole end-to-end customer experience play. Right
Full
now,
stack,
it's actually amazing. Now, this full stack approach is helping us like control the supply. We can create new brands. We don't have to depend on like platforms. We deliver our own food at a much higher service level. We build our own tech. We pivot our own BUs, and like it just keeps things really agile. Yeah, so it's actually a really great thing to be.
I mean, it's
to be having
interesting
right
because
now.
for us, as the agility needed to happen across the supply chain, right? So it wasn't just us and our team that needed to work overnight to switch over to delivery operations. The thousands of restaurants that we work with also needed to switch. And I remember there was, Mother's Day was early on during the circuit breaker period, and people were ordering left and right for Mother's Day. And then a lot of these restaurants just they were learning. It's a steep learning curve to become a great delivery operation, as you know.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these orders are coming in 1 hour late, 2 hours late, and all this stuff. And people were like threatening to boycott restaurants. Can you imagine that? One day they're saying we'll support your local F&B, then the next day, oh, you're half an hour late. I'm going to tell my friends not to order from you anymore.
One thing that people like often like misunderstand about like deliveries is that they think it's just put in a Taobao box and then it becomes a delivery service. Like the food has to be reimagined for it to be delivery first. Like how do you trap the moisture in each of these meals? You provide a sauce to refresh the meal when you receive it. There's a lot of things that go into like being delivery first. It's very different.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. I need to read out a plug. So this is for our annual product development conference that's going online this coming July. And the theme of it is how can products pivot in a pandemic? And it features founders and product leaders from Southeast Asia, China, Silicon Valley, who will share tips and lessons learned on how you can navigate through this challenging time. So you can check out the link in the chat box. Okay, cool. So plug done. I definitely have like a couple of like Q&As from the crowd. So the first question would be, with the easing of the circuit breaker tomorrow in Singapore, what's your take in terms of like revenge spending behavior from the consumers? Good news, right?
Oh, they're revenging on COVID.
Yeah, revenge spending. I'm like,
I mean, I'll just come from a place of data, which is that we've seen it happen in Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Singapore now. The bounce backs are real and they're sharp. I think it's a balance of things though, because while we are seeing the bounce back in terms of reservations, I also have data that suggests that 85% of people are still afraid to go out. Okay, so I think there's further upside on that. I think more people as they go out. I'll just talk from reservations only first. I think from the perspective of people wanting to go out, I think they're being more cautious and they're making reservations. And so that behavior of walking in versus reservations is probably switching more to reservations. On the side of actually wanting to go out, I think only 15-20% of people will actually feel comfortable enough to go out right now and revenge spend, if you want to call it that. I don't think they're going to be spending more. No, they'll probably be less deal-centric, less deal hunters than before. But I don't think people are going to say, you know what, I'm gonna go out and spend like crazy over the next couple of weeks. I think one of the biggest factors influencing that is that people are still feeling afraid on a whole about job security, the economy. I think as much as we joke about it, we're very thankful that the markets have stayed buoyant through this period. And it's funny, right? 1 minute we're talking about moisture levels in Taobao boxes, and the next we're talking about the economy as a whole. But that's the nature of being a startup CEO. You kind of have to balance those two things. The truth is that because the S&P has stayed high enough and hasn't dropped too much, I think people continue to feel fairly confident to go out, eat, but they won't be treating themselves to gigantically expensive, exorbitant meals at this time. They probably want to go out with their family and friends as the first priority.
Reading to the question though, I think maybe this LinkedIn user means this weekend, right? Or like this next week, where I think in both of us, Arrif is going to be having a fantastic week. A lot of restaurant bookings. No one's going to order delivery anymore because they're like sick of things, sick of staying at home, right?
No, that's true.
I think that's the question, right? Like this revenge spending is probably just this weekend, going out to your favorite restaurants and like
There's definitely
your heart
pent-up
out.
demand. Okay, let's not
Pent-up
deny
demand.
that. There's pent-up
Yeah.
demand. But like I said, I think a lot of people are still very cautious. And I also think
Yep.
that the Singapore government has done a great job of putting in place enough measures to ensure
Yes.
that you can't pack your restaurants in either, right? So as much as, if the question is the average table going to be spending 50%, 100% more than it was pre-COVID? I don't think so. I think they'll be spending the same amount of, buying the same amount of food. And then is your question, are the restaurants going to really pack them in? The answer is they can't anymore. So I think overall we're still net in in not as great a position as we were in 2019 in terms of what restaurant revenues are going to be. As for deliveries, I mean, we've only had 3 days of data so far, but it seems to suggest that deliveries are holding up. So the good news is for Chope that now we have an additional revenue stream. It's not a replacement revenue stream. But I think remains to be seen, right? The restaurants haven't opened yet. These last 3 days, they've been ordering for the 3 days, and restaurants are still closed. So come tomorrow, that will be the real test to see.
Yeah.
I see.
Quite curious
So,
about this
maybe
weekend actually.
yeah, exactly right. So, maybe so just reframe this question, right? Are you seeing, or rather, like is the Chope app able to take in reservation right now? And for grain, do you see B2B catering going up as like businesses start to open up their offices?
I mean, I'll answer that first. I think it's a bit straightforward. I think there'll be an awkward phase where Arrif takes all the revenue. There's no food delivery for like a week or so. And at the same time, because like there's restrictions around like a 5 packs, there won't be B2B and there won't be food delivery, or there'll be like definitely a drop. There'll be a slow recovery. I mean, I think we project optimistic the B2B to start rebounding in like August.
Okay.
The base case is probably like sometime in like October, November, and like it could be as far back as like Q3, Q4 next year. What we know for sure is that like the product would change quite significantly. People probably won't want shared meals anymore. It'll be individually packed. It'll be in much smaller group sizes for foreseeable future, and there'll be definitely a lower budget or lower like a kind of a discretionary spending from like the offices or the corporates, right? People will still want to, the offices will still want people to come back together. There'll be less people coming back because it's more remote, but at the same time, they won't be actually spending as much as they used to in the previous pre-COVID days. So I think that's our view of like the B2B world for the next like short 2-3 months to like 12 months out. Yeah, and I mean this honestly, this whole thing is changing, right? It changes on this scenario planning that we do changes on like a monthly basis now. Yeah.
Okay, so just last 2 questions from the community. So, are you guys thinking of more layoffs in the coming months? Quick yes or no.
The answer for us is no, hopefully, right? I think the biggest factor in answering that question is there going to be a second wave of infections anywhere? And does anyone have the answer for that? If you do, let me know. I don't think I'm not a virus specialist, so I don't have a view on that. But the answer is going to be to Sung's point. It's really not driven by us. It's really driven about how COVID evolves, how the virus evolves. So can't answer that question, could the world go into lockdowns? I'm never going to say no again, because I said that in January. Look at us now. I was wrong.
And Sam, for yourself?
I mean, I think the simple answer is no. I mean, based on our scenario planning, but it could. I mean, if scenario changes, like that will change as well, right? So I think it's just really that, you know.
Yeah, and again, let me flip that around. As I said, I think our businesses are actually primed for more growth, right? Like if we crack the ability to solve, better B2C products, for example, for some, different bubble tea brands or whatever the growth area is, and then for Chope, more delivery, and then as more markets open, there's actually potentially growth in our teams, right? That's why we're in this business. So more layoffs depends on external factors, but also bear in mind that we're talking about, it's not just here or down, there's also an up possibility.
Yep. Positive mindset. So last question. So obviously all of us are in a wartime right now, making changes, cutting costs and whatnot. So are there any sort of like approach or good practices that you would continue taking even when post-COVID and we're in peacetime?
Terran Pereira. Of course, you had to shoot a question. Terran has worked at both Grain and Chope, and so he felt he needed to poke us both, I'm sure. So you go first.
I don't think this is a shift. We just kind of like included our investors into our weekly. We have a weekly wartime report that we send to the team, and I mean nowadays I don't like wait for like the month to end, like send a money investor report, and like we send it to like the few stakeholders, and it's actually a team email, internal team email that we then just CC out. And I think that gives a lot of perspective for even like the shareholders, the investors, the stakeholders that we have, and I mean, I think we have been doing this for like a year plus right now, maybe 2 years, and maybe one will argue in 2019 was very much like a peacetime for us. I mean, we doubled revenues, we were profitable, raised money. It's a lot harder to write this during a time like this. But at the same time, I mean, just practicing and like just writing it every week really forces like a lot more clarity. You need to take a stand, and it's hard to take a stand during times like this. And I think that's definitely something that we will definitely continue throughout. I mean, into like call it peacetime. I don't know when peacetime is going to come, but like throughout the existence of Grain. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us,
I'll
just talk about something very tactical, which is working from home. As much as it has been a difficult transition to fully work from home for the last few months, I think there's also been a lot of learning on how it's actually made some people more productive, right? So if we look at our development team, our engineering team specifically, and we quantify sort of the stories, the quantity of engineering is measured in stories, right? And we measure the velocity of the engineering team, and it's actually increased while they were working from home dramatically, because they just spend less time commuting and they're able to focus, and there's less people coming over and tapping them on the shoulder and being like, hey, your hair quite nice. So it's just, there's some advantages to it, and I think we're trying to figure out how to balance those things. And I think the approach that I don't want to call it wartime or peacetime. Like, frankly, there's no definition of that. I don't think there's ever been a moment in the past 8 years of running Chope that we can say, we're finally, there's nothing happening, it's kind of cool right now, let's just chill out. Not really. Maybe the month after you raise a fund and close it, but generally it's just generally at war. So I would say any takeaways from this COVID period that will continue post COVID will probably be something around tactically around how we think of remote working, and we're not alone in that respect, I'm sure.
I wanted to polish like the earlier response. I think maybe it was a bit more like focused on external, but I think for the team to actually hear from like the CEO or like the management team during good times and bad times is equally important, if not more important, during bad times, to be very consistent about what your thoughts are, even though it's not super polished, even though like you don't even know what's happening. and like for the team and the internal and external stakeholders in this case to like constantly hear from you. I think that's quite important.
Yeah, we did
Well,
our first.
Arrif,
I did my first video the other day. It was
I
kind
find
of
it awkward over video.
Yeah,
I wouldn't find it
super
awkward like this.
I
It's like
recorded it.
Willis.
No, a Zoom chat is slightly different because it's dynamic, but
Yeah.
video, you just
Yeah.
talk for 5 minutes into a camera.
Yeah.
We want to ask, like, engineering teams are productive, or are you talking about across the board? Teams are more productive. Because it's harder to track for less technical teams, right?
Well, in the example of engineering teams, it's very highly quantified, right? Because our CTO really measures the velocity down to like daily output. So it's definitely quantifiable. It's harder to quantify sales, right? Because the fact that we can't sell new restaurants is nothing to do with the fact the sales team is not productive. They can't leave their house is the main reason why. So it's hard. And Taryn has been super productive because he's been locked in his house on his multiple screens for the last week. So the operations team is extremely productive, unfortunately for them. They're working 24/7 at this point, getting ready for the reopening tomorrow.
All right, man. Cool. I think that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much, Song. Thank you so much, Arrif. Really appreciate your time. This conversation has been, very honest, and thank you so much for sharing very, very candidly. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks
Thanks for having
everyone.
us.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.